Tammy. Well, folks, thanks for being here tonight. And I know that you're looking forward to hearing from Peter Hildebrandt. He is a wonderful friend, fantastic musician. I'll just say a little about him and then I'll let him say more. He is a member of the Michael O'Neal Singers Board of Directors, and we value so much what he brings to the board, his wisdom as a musician, as an instrumentalist, as an orchestral musician, and just his business sense and all of that. He plays in at least two orchestras in the Atlanta area, the Georgia Philharmonic and the Johns Creek Symphony. And so that keeps him very busy. But even though he plays bass at a professional level, that's not what he does all week long. Uh, Peter, you do something else to pay the bills, and then you play music for the joy of it, I think. So
Yeah,
tell us what you do.
well, that's the way it should be. You should be able to get paid for something, get do something for work that pays well and you enjoy, and then go and make music for fun afterwards. Yeah, I own a small business called Aria Lights. We make music stand lights for professional musicians. So we make lights for all the big symphony orchestras and a lot of the little ones, and Broadway and Lady Gaga, and I mean lots of people you probably have heard of before. It's just a very small business, and it pays the bills and puts food on the table. So I get to geek out on engineering stuff during the day and become a musician at night, which is as it should be.
Well, that's great. And so, folks, if any of you actually know anyone that is ever looking for stand lights, Peter's your guy. So you can always contact Cami, and we'll put you in touch with him. Who knows, you might make a
Get some
few
new
sales
customers
out
here
of
for
this.
Aria
That's not
Lights, sure.
not why you came on to do this, but well, so tell us all, Peter, a little bit about how you got started. Did you were you in band or orchestra in school? Did you take private lessons? What got you started in music?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was a singer to start with. In the first and second grade, I had this beautiful soprano voice. I was part of the choir, and I was a great singer. I come from a very musical family. Everybody in our family does something musical. My dad was the guy that never practiced the piano, but if the church organist got sick, he'd fill in for her. So I started singing in the first grade and did choir up to the second grade, and then the third grade came around, and they said that we had to pick an instrument for playing in the orchestra. And so I went home and I told my siblings. I come from a family of 7 with 5 siblings, and I said, I need to pick an instrument. Well, at this time, I always had been the youngest of 5. We had in order violin, viola, and cello. And they looked at me and said, "You have to take the bass." And I'm like, "Okay." I didn't know what it was. So I went into the teacher the next day, and she said, "What did you choose?" And I said, "The bass." And she's like, "Really? Okay, come with me." And so I was like, it was way too big, and I didn't know how to get it on the bus. But I actually started on the bass in the third grade. I had a little half-size instrument, and I basically just played. I played in orchestra through middle school and high school. We used to call it junior high back then, and then through college, I played in a number of symphonies and stuff while I was working my way through engineering school, and then and then I decided to get better at it. So I got more serious after engineering school, both for orchestral repertoire and chamber music. And eventually I added that music that I really despised. I started to play some jazz. And then I think it was about 20 years ago, I took up the cello too, because I wanted to play more chamber music. And so, yeah, just basically working on your craft. I mean, I went from a pretty okay player to a pretty good player. And that's about the level I got to. So here we are.
Practice matters, doesn't it?
It does
Practice
matter.
a lot, you get better.
Definitely matters.
Well, the tell me, and I think of a lot of people would be interested in hearing what does a a member of an orchestra look for from from a conductor, especially I guess I might say someone who does not normally, well, maybe I shouldn't even categorize it that way. I was going to say someone who doesn't normally conduct orchestra, but might be a choral director hiring instruments, for something, a choral orchestral work. But that really doesn't matter. What is it? Because uh, I'll say in a minute what I think choral musicians are looking for from a conductor, but it might not always be the same thing. So, what do instrumentalists want to see?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously, I think we share a lot, a lot of the needs. We need to know where the beat is. But for orchestra, it seems like for orchestra people, we need a really well-defined beat. We need to see exactly where the beat comes down. And it's more than because we can't hear across the orchestra, and there's also delay. And so, for instance, there's a I don't know what the time is, but there's some long delay from the back of the orchestra to the front of the orchestra. And so when you play in the back of the orchestra, you actually have to play on the front edge of the beat. And this is true for trumpets, and it's true for the people in the last chair, first violins, and it's true for the basses. And so we're doing everything based on where the bottom of the baton is. So that's really important, a well-defined beat, but also our bow strokes follow the motion of the arm of the conductor. And so one thing that's very difficult is if you have a conductor that conducts very stiff beats, because you don't know when they're going to move. Whereas if you have a conductor that conducts beats where they've got some motion as they come down, much easier to follow, because we're basically trying to reproduce. We're trying to end at the same place as the conductor does. I think that's called the ictus, is where you come down. You would know that. I don't know.
It is, yeah.
And then the second thing, which I think all musicians need, is we need to get an idea of what the expression of the piece needs. And the very best conductors that I've worked with are the ones where the orchestra just plays because of their, I mean, more than just fortes and pianos, but because of their very emotion that they bring to the piece. That's what makes the difference. So I don't know. I'm guessing that's the same for choral conducting, but I know that it's a little different.
Well, I think there are a lot of similarities. I think one difference that a lot of choral singers, and all of you might not agree with this, but I would think, and my experience has been that choral singers generally like to, it helps them to see some expression on the face, and sometimes even not mouthing all of the words, because especially if something is polyphonic, words are coming vowels at different points. But if it's a homophonic piece where everyone is moving together, and if it's an ah vowel, if I go, it helps remind people the shape. But with an orchestra, some people are bowing, some people are tooting and all that. So that's not going to help at
Yeah,
all.
I don't think that would help.
Yeah,
No.
it doesn't help at all. I do think that, and it's been an interesting thing. I've been watching the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra as they've been doing their online performances this season. And of course, they're having to work with a reduced orchestra. All the string players are wearing masks, as is the conductor each week or for each concert, also wearing a mask. And so when you just see on the conductor just the eyes, it's very difficult not seeing the facial expression, because that can make a big difference. But one thing that has been fascinating about this is the the camera does a lot of close-ups on players. And so we're able to see players that I've known for years and years in the Atlanta Symphony, but have never seen them so close up, yeah, as they've been playing. And it is showing people something that I've known all along, which is it doesn't appear that orchestra members are looking up at the conductor very much. And
Well,
But but what they are doing is it goes along exactly with what you were just saying, Peter, because they can see almost peripherally. I mean, as they're playing, they can see if there is a a point to the beat, and they can see the arm moving, that sort of thing, and that's really what a good player needs. I don't think there's any question
yeah.
about that.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're absolutely right. I mean, you've got it's all peripheral vision. I know it's the same for a singer because you've got to read the music while you're singing. But one of the things that orchestra players will do, depending on what you play, you want to position your stand so that the conductor is like right underneath the top edge of your stand, so you're looking right over as close to the music as possible. And it's funny being in the business of making music stand lights because I hear a lot about this from orchestral players in terms of what their sight lines are and how it differs in different parts of the orchestra. But yes, and the other thing that which you brought to mind, the close-ups of the musicians, cracks me up because I have the Boston Pops is one of my customers, and they were doing a concert and which was live streamed, and it was just fantastic, a celebration of John Williams' 80th birthday, I think it was. And I'm like, this is going to be great because I'm going to have some awesome video of my music stand lights in use, right? And so there's this perfect shot where they take a wide shot and they zoom in closer and closer and closer to this one musician, and I'm like, yes. And there's this woman, and she is just scowling as she's playing the violin. It's like, oh, it's like, oh, oh well.
not what you were hoping for.
No.
Well, as you mentioned the delay in the sound, and of course the brass players there in the back of the orchestra, because an orchestra is really spread out, much more so than a chorus normally is, unless it's a really large chorus, such as the Michael O'Neal Singers. That's pretty spread out. But one thing that I noticed when I first started conducting instrumental groups, conducting orchestras, I had to understand that the way I would expect a choir to come in exactly when I had to get accustomed to sort of a delayed attack, and especially from string players. Now, and the wind players are a little more on the beat, but many of them are farther away. So you've got the distance thing that creates a problem. But I've noticed what happens with a lot of choral conductors who don't have a lot of experience working with instrumentalists. If they feel like the orchestra is behind them, then they tend to slow down to get with the orchestra, and then the orchestra slows down, and then they slow down, and things can get pretty draggy there. So it's a little different technique in working with orchestral musicians.
Well, and as a freelance musician, you get a chance to work with a lot of different conductors. And when I was living in Portland, Oregon for 17 years, and founded an orchestra there called the Rose City Chamber Orchestra. And what was unique about this orchestra is that we had a different conductor for every concert. We would invite people to come fly in and conduct the orchestra, as a bunch of freelance musicians. And that was fascinating, and that was wonderful on one side of the coin and terrible on the other side of the coin, because you were constantly trying to figure out what your conductor was capable of, how to follow them, and they were constantly trying to figure out what they had in an orchestra. And but one of the things that I think most orchestra musicians learn is that every conductor has a different place for their downbeats, even though they may have, they may put their hand down in one place. That may not be the actual downbeat. And so when you start to play with a new conductor, you're trying to find where that is. And particularly when you have people that come from different disciplines that come together for a pickup orchestra, it takes a while to settle in, and that's why the rehearsals are kind of important.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, tell us what some of the maybe the most enjoyable or satisfying choral orchestral works are that you have played in the past, because I know you've done many over the years.
Well, there are so many. Obviously, you can't go wrong with the Messiah or Beethoven 9,
Yeah.
something like that, where the chorus comes in at the end. No, no, there's some wonderful pieces. Many of the Glorias are fantastic. Really enjoy doing those. I would say, one of the things I did recently, which I just absolutely fell in love with, was Ola Yeilo's Sunrise Mass. Are you familiar
Ah,
with it? He's a Norwegian composer. It's about a 30-minute work. It's
yeah.
basically, it's a mass, so it's got a Gloria and all the things you expect. Um, but it's a lot like a kind of a Philip Glass piece. And his last name, by the way, is spelled very oddly. It's Gjeilo, if anybody's taking notes. But it's pronounced Yaylo. And it's one of these pieces where, like, the orchestra plays uh, might be coming up in volume, oh, and the choir then overtakes the orchestra, oh, and you've got all these things that kind of interplay, and it's just the results are so beautiful. It's yeah, I mean, when you have those moments when you start to tear up when you're playing an instrument, those are great, especially uh, when you're trying to stand on the edge of the stage and not look like you're crying. But but I just think those are the kinds of things. We've all had those experiences. I'm sure. I'm sure all the singers have as well. Um,
Well, and that's probably one of the reasons that you are willing to sometimes 2, 3 nights a week, you're probably in rehearsal, even though you're working full time all day, every day. So you've got to be getting something from that, just as choral musicians feel. Because I mean, all these people who are with us right now, Peter, are giving extra time during the week to be with us on MOS online, but also in their own choruses throughout the year. And so we all get something from that, don't we? I mean, that feeds
yeah,
our souls.
right on,
Yeah.
right
Well,
on.
speaking of feeding your soul, tell us, and I think I probably know the answer to this, but I'm going to see what you say. What is your favorite genre of music or type of music to play? And I'm talking about the type of ensemble, possibly.
Oh, Jesus. Uh, well, I mean, who was your favorite child anyway? Uh, I don't know. I think it's all great. I mean, I mentioned I just finished playing a little jazz trio before coming on this call tonight over the internet with some friends of mine, and jazz is great. I love finding the groove in a jazz piece when everybody's playing the playing in the groove, as it were. I like major like these majestic orchestral works like John Williams. It, you know you can't go wrong with Star Wars. You just can't. Um, um, but inspired sacred choral music is great, as we talked about. With the various Glorias and all the other masses that are out there. I love doing a Broadway musical. So at RUMC, I occasionally played with the acting up group, and I volunteer my time because I just love doing musicals. They are so much fun. So get your feet tapping, and yes, definitely chamber music is up there. I play a lot of chamber music, and I run a chamber music retreat every year up in the mountains with 70 or 80 people that want to come play music with me, which is fantastic. And I love chamber music because every note is a conversation. So, if you're playing in a string quartet, you can't be a loner. You just can't be. And, I'm sure it's the same singing in a barbershop quartet. It's just so wonderful to be able to make sure you're matching what other people are doing and get the tune and get the timing right and move with them. It was interesting. I was watching one of these live streamed presentations. I think it was a like master class on string quartets, and they had 3 string quartets that through the 2 hours jumped in and gave some master class stuff. And they were of three different ages. The first group was of people in their 50s. The second group was people that were in their late 30s, and the third group were in their 20s. They were all fantastic. They were all professional musicians. What I thought was interesting is that the people in their 50s were sitting there and they were playing beautiful music, and they were sitting there and they were playing along. The people in their 30s, they were kind of moving around a little bit with each other. The people in their 20s were just like all over the place, and it got to the point where it was like, I can't watch this anymore. And I think part of what's going on these days is that in music schools they're training string musicians, at least when they play chamber music, to move with the music, and if you're not moving, you're not making music. And frankly, I'm surprised that people didn't fall out of their chairs. It was ridiculously crazy, but it's all the same thing. It's all about the conversation. But yeah, I don't know. I can't pick a favorite child.
Well, it's interesting. You've mentioned just about everything, so it just shows that you love music and you love playing. What I would have guessed was chamber music. Just because so many of the instrumentalists I have known, especially orchestral musicians over the years, that's almost always what I hear. And I think quite often it's because players of such high quality, high caliber, are playing, say, in a big symphony orchestra, such as the Atlanta Symphony, all week long, having to bend to the whims and the desires of the conductor, the guest conductor, whoever he or she may be, or the principal conductor. And when they do chamber music, they're able to communicate with each other and have an individual voice. And so I think
I hope that woman from the Boston Pops got a chance to go play some chamber music after this performance. So, it was Star Wars. She was playing Star Wars and she had a scowl on her face. I don't know.
Yeah, that might have been something at home. Who knows? So, yeah. Well, Cammie, do we have any questions that have come through, or somebody might want to raise their hand?
If you have questions, go ahead and enter them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand. It's hard to see everybody, but we'll try to do that. But somebody, Peter, when you were talking about your family and you chose the bass, did your family ever play in ensembles after you became proficient? I guess you were the youngest brother. Okay.
Yeah, it's funny because I think maybe once we did. By the time that I was starting to play well enough that I could read those notes that had holes in the middle of them. My older siblings were in high school. They were playing violin in the orchestra. So we might have played something together. A couple of them have since stopped playing. But my next older sister still plays the cello, and my next older brother, who are twins, still plays the viola. And in fact, I played over Jamulus. I played some internet cello duets a couple of nights ago with her, which was really quite a pleasure. We hadn't done that before. So yeah, and the other thing that's funny is, when growing up, my dad, he would always say, "Hey, someday maybe you'll play the Trout Quintet." And he would love to listen to classical music on the radio in the car. And I didn't know what the Trout Quintet was, but I was like, "Oh, okay," And I got older, and when I finally moved out, I went to college, and I started living in Portland. I got a chamber group together, and I said, we need to work on the Trout Quintet. So we had piano and four strings, fabulous piece by Schubert. And so we worked it up. We worked it up for weeks, and my dad was going to visit. So I was like, "This is going to be great," So he comes to visit, and I'm driving back to the airport. I said, "I have a special treat for you." He says, "Oh yeah?" I said, "Yeah. Tonight I've got a group together, and guess what? We're going to play the Trout Quintet." And he's like, "Oh, okay. Well, that's fine." I'm like, "What do you mean, Dad? My whole life you've told me you wanted me to play the Trout Quintet. I'm finally capable of playing it." And he's like, "Oh, well then, son, I'm very happy for you." And I'm like, "Oh, forget it." I think he forgot that he.
I know it. Cammie, I think I saw a question come in.
Yes. How many hours in a typical week, Peter, do you play in practice?
I'm having a little trouble with the connection. Sorry. I didn't quite hear the question.
I think you heard that.
Well, I mean, this is right now we're in unusual times, truthfully, but on a typical week, I mean, I will be playing music almost every night of the week in
Yeah.
some form or another. And if I have, as I often do, if I have a gig coming up, I've got to take the nights that I'm not playing with somebody and use those to practice. So I'd like to say that I'm a heavy duty practitioner. I actually I like to keep in shape by playing rather than practicing a lot. So that doesn't mean that when there's a difficult passage, I'm not going to pull it out and take a look at it.
Sure.
Nobody wants to be embarrassed, but especially.
But actually, the rehearsals that you're doing, that is practice. I mean,
It is. It is. And
yeah.
actually, that I would say that if there's anything that has improved my craft more than anything else, it is playing. It's not practicing.
Sure.
So, yeah. Great question. Great question.
Yeah. And there was another one, Cammie.
Yes, about where can, and I was going to ask this too, when you mentioned playing over Jamulus and stuff, where can we hear you, or did you record those things? Are you on YouTube? I know
I hope
that.
not, but
Oh,
I mean, people, when I used to work for a large Fortune 500 company, and when I'd bring my bass in and park it in the corner, so because I had a rehearsal at night, and people would always come by and they'd say, "Ooh, play something for us." And it's like, no, you don't want to hear the string bass. You really don't. There's nothing. It's an instrument that should stand in the back. It's not. But I don't know. I play in the Johns Creek Symphony. There's some recordings online of that, and that's probably the best place to look. I also play in a jazz group called After Hours Jazz Ensemble. So we've got some recordings online there if you want to hear a little bit of jazz. And I don't know.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you. We'll
question.
try and look for some of those links, and maybe we can send those out tomorrow, everyone.
Well, now, when you were practicing tonight, or with you said it was a jazz trio tonight that you were working with. So were you using Jamulus with that? Is that how you were?
We were. Yeah,
Explain it, just maybe give a brief explanation, because some of these people might not know about this. It works especially well with very small, groups like this. I mean, it would be difficult for a choir of 50 people to do it, for example, that sort of thing.
And well, so yeah, let me explain what it is, and then I can talk a little bit about the size. A Jamulus is free software, which you can use on the Mac or PC, and it lets you, because I'm a nerd, I like nerdy stuff, but it lets you play in almost real time with people remotely located. The closer you are together, the better. And if you have a wired internet connection, it's better because you have less delay time. And so you try to reduce the delay, but we get a connection where the delay between what I play and what I hear is on the order of 50 milliseconds.
Wow.
Which is basically real time.
Yeah.
And so we all connect into a server. There are like thousands of servers around the United States that you can connect into for free. And you just play with other folks. And I played a play-in session with like 35 string musicians on Jamulus, and it worked amazingly well. And there are now some Jamulus servers that are designed, some people that host Jamulus servers that are designed for choral groups that can in fact take 50 or more people at a time. So we're getting there. We're getting there. So it's amazing. I can't believe how fast the internet is. I can't believe you can do that. I mean, I was playing with my sister in Massachusetts, and it was just like being in the same room.
That's great.
That is
Cool.
great.
Jamulus, how do you spell that? It's Jamulus.
Right.
So Jamulus, if you're looking for it.
Great, thank you.
And the other thing I like about Jamulus is because the servers are public. You can be playing along and somebody from Norway will jump in and say, "Oh, I play the bongos. Can I play along?" "Oh, sure, come on." So
Oh, how fun.
it's really fun. You meet people from all over the world.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That
Thank
can
you.
be fun, but
Yeah, well, yeah. You can also mute them if you want to.
yeah, that's right.
Does that mean Michael's replaceable? No, it doesn't.
Oh, of course. We've known that, Dick, for a long time. So
Yeah. I do have a comment about choral conductors and orchestral things, because I sing with different people and different people have different backgrounds. But I find that the choral directors who direct other musicians go into a different mode when the orchestra or the band is there. They are very much more exact, and it's unusual because with choral music, they usually paint a broad brush, and an orchestra really doesn't get this very well. And it may work with a choral group. And Michael does a bit of that, he paints the music for us,
sure.
but the orchestra wants that downbeat. So and Michael changes modes when he's got other kinds of music public there.
I'm glad that he does. We appreciate it. I'll tell you a story, which I probably shouldn't, which is a bit out of school, Dick, but we, when I was living in Oregon, the conductor of the Oregon Symphony is a fellow fabulous conductor by the name of James Dupriest. And he has an incredible reputation. And he is so incredibly musical. However, he loves to conduct in this very flowy style, conduct the orchestra. And so I got a chance to talk to one of the Oregon Symphony players, and I said, I just dying to know, how do you follow him? And he was like, we don't. we follow the concertmaster. We watch what the concertmaster is doing, and that's all we can do. So there you go.
I remember a story once about Leonard Bernstein, and it was someone was commenting to one of the players of the New York Philharmonic, how in the world do you folks follow him? Because, watching him conduct on TV and all of that. And of course, Leonard Bernstein, phenomenal musician, phenomenal, but he was also a phenomenal showman. And when he was on the camera, he always knew he was on the camera, and he could get very flowery even when he's doing the orchestra. So this member of the New York Philharmonic said, "Oh, well, that's what he does for show." And by that time, we know what we're doing, and we don't have to watch him. And I'm sure they were watching the concertmaster, but said in rehearsal, it's a very different matter, because that's when he's down to business. And he is very specific about what he wants, and his conducting looks quite different in rehearsal than it does in performance.
Well, I hope that maybe you'll become more flowery for performances. I probably just ruined you.
That's right.
Peter, somebody asked, and I wanted to ask this as well, about your instrument.
Oh.
I wonder, how many instruments do you own? And with that, I don't remember when it was, honestly. I think it was 3 or 4 months ago. We were looking at your bass that you recently had refurbished or repaired, and I was fascinated by what was done to it. Can you talk a little bit about both things? How many instruments you own and
Sure. Well, the problem with playing lots of instruments is that you can't own too many of any one instrument. And I'm cheap. So I have one bass and I have one cello. But I have a cousin who's also a bassist, and he has like 15 basses. I don't know what he does with them all. But anyway, so that may be a bit atypical. But I also have a mandolin, and I have a guitar, and I have a piano, and a bunch of other things. My instrument is about 170 years old. It dates from the 1850s, and I mean it's an estimate because there's no label in it. So it's anybody's guess. It was probably a Czechoslovakian student instrument, and it has been through heck and back. There's a big chunk of wood that was taken out of it at some point. I like to say it was in a bar brawl, but I don't know. And somebody just patched in whatever wood they had on hand in the front of the instrument. It was in the Les Brown Big Band for many years, and so it's got history. And so that I don't know how many years, but the bass player in the Les Brown Big Band developed arthritis, and eventually I ended up with the instrument. But yes, about 3 years ago, I was at a rehearsal, and it was dumb. I had it sitting up on its wheels, and the thing just tipped over, and it broke the neck right off the instrument. Yeah, it was a horrible, horrible thing. And coincidentally, the bass player who was standing next to me worked for an instrument repair shop, and he graciously helped me out to the car with all the pieces of my instrument. And so it was in the shop for 8 months. Luckily, it was insured. And they basically they carved a brand new neck. In order to put that on, they had to take the top off the front. And of course, when you do that, you discover that because it was built in the 1850s, they don't make them back then the way they make them today. And so they had to restructure the whole thing that supports the neck. They had to do a whole bunch of woodwork for that. And then they put the top back on, and the edges were so banged up over the years that they couldn't make the top fit well. So they took the top back off and they put new wood all the way around the outside. They grafted it on, and they grafted the neck into the old peg box at the top. Anyway, long story. But so I like to say I have a Franken bass, and it still, amazingly, it still plays really well. In fact, in a lot of ways, they tightened it up, and so a lot of the rattles and buzzes that basses tend to have, it doesn't have. And even though it's a little heavier now, it still plays really well. So I'm very, very thankful that we were able to resuscitate it. And I probably spent more money than I should have, but what do you do? I mean, what are you going to do? Throw it in a dumpster? A 170-year-old? No, you're not going to do it.
Got to get it fixed. That's right. Well, singers, you see how much easier our lives are. You know, we just have to take care of our voice and go to the doctor if there's a problem or something. But we're fortunate in that way.
Yeah, that's true.
And
you don't have to carry it in.
You even have to make sure I mean, you couldn't drive a Prius around probably, could you, and carry that bass.
Oh, yeah, it's quite an experience when you go to the car dealership. You have to bring the instrument with you, and then all the car salesmen want to come out at the same time. Like, oh, maybe if you put the seat down and wrap the seat belt around the neck, and it's like, no, this isn't going to work.
I know.
Yeah.
That's it. And oh, I see another question maybe coming through, but if anybody else has questions, if you'll type them in the chat. Oh, okay, Dick, you're making another joke. I see. Very funny of you.
Keep up with him. Keep up.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me tonight.
Oh,
thank you for letting some foreigner come into your midst. So,
oh, listen, and we're looking forward to the day when we'll all be making music together again. We had in fact, there was the Lord Nelson Mass by Haydn was we were scheduled to do that last March, you know, and had to cancel it about a week or so before the performance when all of this started, and you know, we couldn't be together anymore. So we'll schedule that, and we'll hope our vocal soloists still have their voices and everything when the time comes around. So we'll keep playing and
thank you all for the great questions. Those were awesome.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks. Have a good evening, Peter.
All right, no
Oh,
problem.
look I see applause. That's great. Thank you.
That's right.
Thanks for helping us welcome Peter, and thank Peter for doing this. Great to hear your stories, Peter, and may the force be with you. I also got that in the chat from
That's
fellow
right.
Star Wars fans. Peter, again, thank you. And singers, if you